So, what happens when two former journalists press record and go on a podcast? Well, you're about to find out. Bobby Warren on Zack Miller Says. 3, 2, 1, go. It's Wooster Media, right?
Worcester. Just think Wuhster. Worcester.
Man, I practiced that for like an hour and I thought I was going to be good.
Ah!
Say it again? How do I...
Worcester. What's up, Worcester? But, yeah, if it's Rooster, it should be Wooster, right? But it's not.
So it's not Rooster.
No, it's not. It's Worcester.
Not Rooster. And if I mess it up, we can just say that's why I'm not in journalism anymore. Bobby, what's happening, brother?
Hey, not much. Just trying to survive, I guess.
Yeah. So, Bobby Warren, you joked right before I pressed record saying, if I mess up your name. So how did I mess up your name?
No, not my name, my company's name.
Got it. Okay, I'm just making sure because I am the king of mispronunciations, and maybe it was Booby Warren. No.
Hey, both of us share a background in journalism,
Yeah.
and so for decades, my name was in the newspaper, and it's hilarious how many people misspell it. But I take that as karma for getting so many things wrong in my stories. So I'm not bitter about it. It's just I owed that. So.
There you go. So obviously, we both come from the journalism background. Where did you go to college?
Where didn't I go to college? I started out at Daytona Beach Community College, which we called Harvard by the Highway, Southern Halifax Institute of Technology. It's now Daytona State University.
Okay.
Then I went to University of Central Florida in Orlando, UCF. We called it You Can't Finish, and I didn't. And then I ended up at Cincinnati Bible College and Seminary, which became Cincinnati Christian University, which just folded at the beginning of the year, so it doesn't even exist anymore.
But you're from the New England area?
Yeah, I'm in Revere, Massachusetts, place we call Severe Revere.
But it was too cold for you to do the next 4 or 5 years of your life, or what got you to Florida?
My dad was a chef, and I tell people we moved around more than military families. One of his friends would be a general manager at a hotel and say, "Hey, Bob, I need you to come run my restaurant." So he was a great chef, and I actually worked for him for a while. He never owned the restaurants, but I worked for him. He was a chef.
Got it. I live in a military town, Norfolk, Virginia Beach. And so a lot of military here. So, people are constant transient and whatnot. And then I grew up in D.C. and that's, also transient. So I get it from the chef standpoint. Media, the word media, how do you define that?
Nobody's ever asked me that question before.
I told you last night I was going to ask you questions that no one else did. Come on, man.
It's like kind of like that judge. He didn't know how to define porn. He just knew what it was, But so media, I look at it as various forms of communication. I guess if I were an artist, it might be the substances or the canvases or the things I work on. But I view media as just different avenues of communication.
Okay. Are journalists in the media?
Yes, I primarily think of them as the media.
Is the word media synonymous with the word press?
I think it can be.
Because it seems like sometimes there is this this back and forth where we're not the media, we're the press, we're journalists. And it seems like some that are in are getting emotional about the three words, are they the same thing? Are they not? And so that's why I wanted to start with this, because I think it's so interesting that I use all three that way. It sounds like you do too. You know, a journalist is someone that's in the press, that's someone that's in the media, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like now the word media is actually having a in the point that I'm making is it's a bad connotation where the media is like that. You know, it's the big brother, it's the bad person. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I believe there was a column in the Washington Post recently about, hey, there's no such thing as the media, and to me, I spent decades in journalism, and I think I think a lot of journalists have thin skins. They don't want to be criticized. They don't want to be called out. And I was telling a friend of mine that I used to work with down in Daytona Beach at the News Journal down there that, probably out of all the criticism I received over the years, probably 10 to 15% was off base. I think the rest of the time they had a legitimate concern. Now, I always did, like, every word that I used in a story, I contemplated. And when I just try to take a shortcut, that's when mistakes entered. But usually, if somebody would email or call and have a complaint, I had a reason for why I chose a specific word, a specific phrase. But when they talk to me, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I could have done that better. So, you know, as far as like the media, I understood what the writer was getting at, but I also think it was just kind of a little whiny in its tone. You know, I know we're not. I know I still kind of I still kind of refer to myself as a journalist. I love journalism. I miss journalism, but I think you and I departed for similar reasons. But it's just like I don't understand why they there's a thin skin.
Right.
And like, I know we're not elected officials, journalists aren't elected officials, but we are public figures because we're out there all the time. Our name's out there, our work is out there. So I think some journalists needs to just buck up a little bit and let people vent and have their frustrations, and everything will be all right. It's not the end of the world.
Sure. Okay, so a lot to go on from just that. Um, we'll start with this. So they don't like to be criticized. Journalists, you're saying journalists don't like to be criticized yet. That's kind of what they do in a way, where they're pulling out information on people. And so how when you start having those conversations with those individuals over the years that maybe criticized you, were you able to yourself, Bobby Warren, to get thick skin so that you could handle that? Because I think that's something that, and we'll parlay this into business in a little bit, but like that's probably helped you in business because you figured out how to have thick skin. But it's like, is it a cake and eat it too type of effect with this, where it's like, hey, like you gotta grow thick skin because you're saying something that's potentially controversial or hot topics, and if someone else can say something, why can't they say something to you?
I'll tell you, when I was an assistant editor at a newspaper in Washington Courthouse, Ohio. It's called the Record Herald. And at the time, there was a city manager there, Steve Sobers. And he was an interesting figure because he he was a really kind and thoughtful man, but he was sort of a polarizing figure as a city manager. Some people, you know, people didn't like the decisions he made or what he did, and I remember people would just rail all over him, complain, talk bad about him to his face in city council meetings, and he would just sit back and just kind of wouldn't respond. And getting to cover him and see him in all different kind of situations, I'm like, Steve, how come you don't respond to any of this? Because now I'm Italian, and by nature, we kind of have to respond. And he said, Bobby, he says, you just got to let them have their say. And that brief interaction at what was really the beginning of my reporting career. I had started off as a copy kid at Daytona Beach. I wrote briefs, I wrote obituaries, but my reporting career actually started with an assistant editor's position because I had to write as well as a small newspaper. But that one interaction just kind of stayed with me my entire career. And if people criticized me, I never really took it as personal. It's just like, you know what? They need to vent. They need to get this out. And, sometimes, I misspelled names of kids and, you know, then they can't put it in their scrapbook and you feel bad about those kinds of things. And some things I just messed up, just got a name wrong or whatever. Sometimes I thought I understood something and I didn't, but
So you
I,
weren't perfect? Come on, Bobby.
haha, far from it.
So what got you in? When did you realize that you wanted to become a journalist? Way back when?
Well, I was kind of, I think either my late teens or early 20s, because now I ended up being a non-traditional student. Um, but I really wanted to be a screenwriter. I wanted to write screenplays. And so as I thought about this and as I explored it as a career, I thought, if I were to be a successful screenwriter, how many screenplays would I sell in my career? Two, maybe? You know, so I'm like, well, what do you do the rest of the time? So how do you put food on the table? My goal in life was simple, and I wish I would have fleshed it out a little bit more. But my goal in life was I wanted to get paid to write. So I did not enter. So journalism, I thought was a way to get paid. I could get paid to write. I did not enter the profession to become, the voice for the voiceless. I wasn't going to speak truth to power. I wanted to get paid to write. That's it. And so if it was writing your story, writing somebody else's story, I didn't care. I did not have an agenda. I just wanted to tell your story. And I know, I know the media gets bashed for having a liberal bias, and but at the newspaper where I worked in Worcester, Ohio, we had a small staff, and our political leanings were all over the wall. I mean, from one spectrum to the other. You know, progressives were represented, liberals, libertarians, conservatives, Republicans, all of them, all of those were in our small newspaper. But when you read the copy, when you read the stories, you'd be hard pressed to tell anybody's political leanings. And, you know, so
When did that change?
uh, I think that for the most part, if you get to the smaller newspapers, they're just there writing about what's going on in their communities.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you look at state capitals in DC, you were in DC. I think there's sort of a herd mentality because everybody's like it seems like everybody's using the same same in our business keywords, the same words, same phrases.
Well, someone was saying the word recently is unprecedented. This is unprecedented times.
Yeah, right. So they pick up on that, and but I think when you get down to the local level, it's just people trying to make a living, you know, underpaid, overworked, uh, very little support from corporate. So
That was something that I thought was interesting in my world. Is I don't necessarily remember why I got into it. I also love to tell stories from a visual standpoint, and I was never a good writer. So we're polar opposites on that, but yet we have the same heart of storytelling and getting to the core of telling that from a people perspective. But what was interesting is I remember when I was started getting like my first interviews and job offers and things like that, and some of the numbers that they were throwing out. that I would be making annually. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean I'm going to get $17,500 a year and I'm going to live in, what was the city? Jonesboro, Arkansas. I'm like, what? Like,
Ooh, pigs,
yeah,
suey.
yeah. I was like, this seems ridiculous. And then I ended up staying in my home state and getting a little bit more than that. But, um, yeah, I mean, that was not. I don't know when people start making money. I actually haven't asked some of my friends that I went to college with like how much money they're making now, because some of them are still in the J world, and I should ask them what they're making. But my guess is not, like crazy amounts of money. I mean, are people? It's my understanding that people aren't making the $200,000-$300,000 a year anymore. They might be making, low six figures. But I know you were never in that kind of position, and you did this
No,
for a long time.
no, I was never there. My best year was like 34,200.
And how many
My
years in
best
the
year.
world were you at that point?
My first journalism job was 1988.
Uh huh.
That's when I was a copy kid, and then I left in January 2018. So I mean, so there were
So
some
your last
breaks.
year there, you were making 34 G's, and you're 30 years into that. Is that 30 years?
Yeah, I forget how long I was at that newspaper. Maybe 15 years, 16 years.
So what's interesting is I have this theory. I have no data behind it other than just me observing TV people and people in media, is that they get this career in journalism where they can tell stories and they can write and they are on deadlines, but then they realize that, hey, maybe this isn't for me, but they stay in it because they don't know where else to use their skills, right? Is that why you stayed in it for so long? Because it seems like,
Oh, I loved it.
yeah,
I really loved journalism, and I wished, I made more. Um, and so there's this tension of kind of doing what you love, and that, the money isn't everything. And but it's like at some point, I'm tired of seeing high school kids driving better cars than I am. I'm it's like, there were just things that I couldn't do. Because I was a non-traditional student, my career stopped. So,
what does that mean, non-traditional student, by the way?
so I went to Daytona Beach Community College out of high school. I stopped for a while. I went back. So I forget. So if I went back in '88, I think I was 25 years old when I started back at college. So non-traditional just means you're not right out of high school. You go, kind of an older student going back. So I was 25, and I ended up, you know, I think, well, I finally got my bachelor's in like 96, and I finally got a master's in 98. And so, you know, I was out of the workforce primarily from like 93 to 98. So that stops your earnings potential. Your pay rate is kind of put on hold, and things like that. So, you know, um, media outlets, however you define them, I know a lot of newspapers saying, they want reporters, but they'll say this is an entry level position. So they get you coming in at the bottom. So I'm like 30 something years old, starting out pretty close to the bottom as far as earnings potential. And so money was an issue, um, but ultimately it wasn't why I left. But, because I love journalism, miss it every day. Um, I have a brother-in-law who quit smoking decades ago, and he misses smoking every single day. And I think I could relate to him because I miss journalism. I just don't miss kind of what it has become, or print journalism anyway.
Interesting. I feel like in a way we're in the same world. Like going I don't miss meeting people on the worst day of their lives. I don't miss the egos of the newsroom, if you will. I don't miss that side of it. But I do enjoy telling a story of meeting people and stuff like that. So I don't miss that because I still do it, and I do it in a different world. But it's interesting how we feel there. Why? So content is bigger than ever before, and I'll define content as the same way that you define media. It's pieces of material, videos, audio, podcast, copy, blogs, traditional media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Content is bigger than ever before, yet some of the earliest of content providers are just absolutely getting destroyed in the content world. You worked in newspapers for a long time. Why are they not getting with the times, even though they were on the forefront?
Yeah, I think with newspapers, what they face is they have millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in assets sitting in their print plant. And, you know, so how do you abandon the print product and walk away from all those assets, right? How, you need to keep them making money for you. At the same time, this is what I don't understand is like they're not able to make digital work for some reason. I guess about the New York Times is able to do it. Uh, Motley Fool is able to do it. Their writers can earn six figures a year writing like 20 stories a month. So that's 5 stories a week. So Motley Fool is doing it, and you know, Gatehouse, Gannett, or I started calling them GateNet because they merged. Is like they're struggling to figure it out, and they're going into a lot of other things like live events, the best of the best competitions, contests, basically readers awards. And I don't know why they can't figure it out. And I, I write for bloggers. Some of it's ghostwriting, some of it I get byline. And one of my clients, I get paid more a month from this client than I made as a journalist, and that's just one client. And I the funny thing is I can't tell you like how many clients I have. I think I have 10, around 10, but I don't ever count them. I just do the work for them. I know I do the work for them. And so one of my clients, I'm making more than I did as a journalist. And so these bloggers, a lot of them have figured it out, that they're able to monetize their digital content. And it's a shame, but the overhead costs for newspapers is just incredible, you know. And now with technology, like you could report live from anywhere because you got Facebook Live, something like that. And so the entry point, how much did a live satellite truck cost when you were in?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm sure.
Right. Now I don't know if you have an iPhone or Android, but with that, you can go live anywhere and you can compete with, these television stations.
Well, what's interesting is when Facebook Live first came out, and then it went to the general public to be able to have it, meaning that everyone had access to go live on their phones, not just someone who has a ton of influence or followers. I said that I thought it was the greatest feature ever invented because now everyone could be building up their personal brands, and that's what your traditional media should be investing in, is in investing in individual brands, and then the conglomerate or the umbrella of all those things could be, here is our media influencer people. And it was so interesting because they'd be so against it. And I'm like, you're against it because you don't want to adjust to what the future is. And so about 4 or 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to kind of convince a station president to have me host a TV show on a business show on the local ABC where I live. And it was so interesting because I remember she was like, well, what do you think about the show? I said, the show's great, but it should be online first. And her response at that point was, well, we're a TV station. We host TV shows. And I was like, yeah, well, that's fine, but the world is moving digital and we should be on the forefront of that. And what was interesting is the show did about 25,000 people a week. I recently, about a year ago, it kind of just stopped, right? Where they moved it more to like a pay to play in newscast instead of just normal, not a normal dedicated show. But the stats that they would use 6 months to 12 months into it were the YouTube views or the Facebook views that had hundreds of thousands or millions of views, instead of that, oh, well, we get 25,000 weekly hits, that watch. They started saying, oh, well, some of our segments have millions of views. And I'd be like, who's right now, right? It's like, I told you this should be this dedicated show. You should play the YouTube, you should play the search engine of a YouTube or something like that and win on that, and then you can make more money off of it. And so it's kind of happening, or it kind of happened at least with that show, where it was like, you move with the punches, realize what the future is looking like. I realize you're a TV station, I realize you're a newspaper station, but like, where are people consuming, and make sure that you can do it. And so it's interesting that I could be going on Facebook Live right now and recording this conversation with you and the world could see it. That's a very powerful thing. And I don't think enough people recognize that in the world.
Yeah. And it's just interesting, because you see kind of the long play and how you put a YouTube video up and it's there forever. It's not ephemeral like a newscast.
Right.
And so if you can monetize that channel, or if you can get some type of action from visiting that channel, then it's kind of like you have this opportunity for this monetization to just be dripping over a long period of time. It's like I tell my clients, I said, look, I don't want to make as much money as I can from you every month. I would just want to make a little bit every month for a long period of time. It's just like I'm just in it for the long game. So if a client says, well, I want you to do this, right? And say it's some small thing and I'm going to charge $100. In my mind, that's $1,200. That's just how I look at it. It's like, okay, that's 1,200. Now I need another piece. And so it's just all layered, and it's like, I mean, that's smart, because once you get on digital and you get that presence, then people are going to return to it all the time, especially if you say, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit the bell to get your notification,
So what made you finally throw in the towel and go to this world?
So we were a family-owned newspaper, been around for 100 years or so, and we were bought by Gatehouse Media. And out of one side of the miles, they talked about how they were a $1.2 billion corporation. And let me tell you, when Gatehouse, when I learned that Gatehouse bought us, I was excited, because I thought, wow, they're this big, media giant. They got deep pockets. We're probably going to get more training. We're probably going to get raises. There's more money. They're going to, we're going to get more raises, more training, and just things are going to be better. And so what happened? I think two things happened, and I'll probably always blame Gatehouse, but I don't necessarily know that it was Gatehouse. So the two people who were responsible for hiring me, one, about a year before the acquisition or so, was promoted to a different position. So she remained at the same, she was our news editor. She remained at the same desk, but she was working over a different group of people instead of the reporters. She started heading up a design center. And then the managing editor, who was there, he retired. So the two people responsible for bringing me in, working with me, keeping me honest and stuff, they were gone, uh, essentially. So one retired and one wasn't my supervisor anymore, and it was just a different place. So we were sold, you know, um, a billion, $1.2 billion corporation. The people that brought me in weren't there anymore, and it was just a different place. And it's easy to blame Gatehouse, and I probably always will, but if I'm honest, it's probably not totally that. But I just wanted to get out of there. It was just different, you know. So um, I ended up starting my own business. And with journalism, like this, is that a lot of people see it as a calling, right? I never did. I'm telling you, I was a capitalist. I wanted to make money writing. That was it. And but to be a good journalist, your ethics have to be impeccable, right? So I could not really work on a side hustle and be in these financial arrangements with other people in the town while I was still a journalist. So I had to make a clean break. And so I decided to act on.
Is that because, hold on, so is that because you would have to, if you had to end up doing a story on someone that was a client, or you had to write about a story on something, and there was that line there where you didn't want to cross it, where it's like, hey, well, I'm working with this person here, they're paying me, and then
Yeah.
okay. I don't know that
Yeah.
everyone would
So
think
how?
that ethically, so good on you for that.
Well, I mean, journalism is a lifestyle, and I mean,
So that's
if you
interesting,
aren't
though. So if
ethical,
we really think about the difference between journalism, ethics, and kind of media, maybe, or journalism, media, content, stuff like that, maybe the word ethics isn't in the word media in your traditional type of content, where maybe that's what journalism really has, that is setting apart the other stuff, is that word ethics.
yeah, I mean, so every blog that is monetized, read our disclaimer. Here's how we make money. So they kind of spell out, look, we have these affiliate marketing agreements, or this could be sponsored content. Uh, I was asked to write a piece of sponsored content, and I didn't know it was sponsored content. And I literally loved the service, right? And so,
So you're at the paper, and they're asking you to write a
no,
piece
no,
of.
this was after. This was
Got it.
after. So for a personal blogger, a personal finance blogger, I'm asked to write this content. I didn't know it was sponsored content. I was like, "Hey, can you write about this?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I love it." So I write this glowing thing because I truly love it, use it, and then I find out it's sponsored. I'm like, "Well, I'm glad I didn't know it was sponsored before I wrote it because, would that have impacted the way I wrote?" But anyway, I loved it, so it wasn't a problem. But personal finance blogs and other blogs, they spell out like, hey, we're making money off our affiliates. We might be our sponsored content. But I think when you get into journalism, it's like, nah, you just, there's got to be that separation. You can't have a financial relationship or, with somebody and then have to write about, if you're asked to write about them, you just need to say, I can't do that or something.
But it would be unfair to say that news organizations don't make money,
Correct.
right? And so where is that line then between making money
So,
and the ethics, the journalism side of it? Because to the naked eye, they're the same thing.
so early on in my career, I learned that advertising department was revenue producing and the news department was revenue consuming. So the ad department, historically, advertising paid the freight for newspapers. If you think about subscriptions, they paid just a fraction of what it cost to produce a newspaper. So the money was in the advertising, and that's all getting blurred now. But traditionally, it was, advertising paid the freight, and subscriptions took care of some of the costs, but not a lot of them.
which is interesting because the show that I was doing, we could just interview people that we thought were the right fit from a business perspective, and then it switched to pay to play. And basically, when it went to pay to play, I then didn't want to do it anymore because I was like,
Right.
this is not like, I remember one time someone was like, I want you to say this. And I was like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm not. And it wasn't even bad. It was like, we want you to ask this question. I was like, no, like, that's not the way that I go. Like, I'm going to ask the questions that I want. I'm going to do this the way that I do. I know what the viewer is wanting because I am a business owner, and that's who that's who the viewership is, and so that's who this person is. So I'm going to treat it like that, not like, oh, well, we want to sell this. No, I'm not interested in that game, and I'm not going to be your spokesperson for so and so flooring. I don't care. I don't. It's kind of like you said. Like, I don't look at it from an ethical standpoint. I look at it as like, I don't want to be paid to just talk about someone, because that's who the sponsor paid. And so I remember hearing, like, you're a sports guy, so you probably know, like, Colin Cowherd apparently wanted to leave ESPN because he wanted to dictate who his sponsors were for the show, right? Pat McAfee, who you might know, from West Virginia University, was a punter and kicker there, has become a huge brand, wanted to dictate those type of things, and they wanted the people that were listening to consume content from advertisers that they liked, and I appreciate that, and I think there's something powerful to that, and so I don't know. I mean, it's just I think when you actually, I think they try to sell advertising to the people that would be listening, but then when you really have the person who is the host, if you will, buying in as well, I mean, that can be super powerful.
Yeah, and when you talk about kind of dictating, like, who you work with or who advertises with you. You know, as a Christian, sometimes I struggle with what clients will I take on. You know, so part of what I do is search engine optimization. And I had someone ask me, can you help me with my website? And I'm like, okay, well, what's your website? And I get to it, and it's a site that sells adult toys,
Oh
right?
boy.
And so it's like, let's just say I really don't know the market, so I wouldn't be a good fit. So anyway, I politely declined, and one of the things I learned was that a lot of digital marketing agencies just will refuse to work with those kinds of businesses. Uh, I don't like working with politicians either. I just you know it's the interesting thing is, most of the work I do is for out of companies, people that are out of state, right? So I have a handful of local clients, but I still don't want to get involved in politics. So my attorney, what he told me is that, well, charge them an astronomical rate because, you're going to lose X amount of clients because of it. And I just tell them, I said, look, um, I I don't work with politicians, and I have a good out as well, because one of the clients I have worked for was a governmental organization, and so I don't do work on a regular basis. Um, However, from time to time, I've done projects and I've done consulting. So I can always lean back and say, hey, look, it's conflict of interest because, I work for this governmental organization. I really shouldn't be tied up with, partisan activities.
I'm very much in a similar stand to you, where the first thing that I'm thinking about when I'm working with a client, when I'm looking for someone to do from like a coaching perspective, is the first question I ask is, do I want to work with this person? Which really deep down is, do I like this person? And if I don't like that person, then I'm not going to work with them. I'm not going to, put them in some sort of my funnel, if you will. I'm not going to put them in. It's not that I don't appreciate them and don't respect maybe what they've done, but if you want my A game, I gotta like you too. And so I think that's a very powerful thing. And so, it would come down to, is the thing that you're working on something that I can get behind too and like? Because if I can't get behind something, well, I'm definitely not going to like it. I'm not going to give you that same type of thing. So I'm with you on that. And I think more companies should do things like that, because I think it can be powerful. I want to ask you a couple of questions that are writing specific. And so, what's a byline?
Byline would be your name that accompanies a story. So this is by, Bobby Warren. This is by Zack Miller. So it's kind of the name at the top of a story that lets the reader know who wrote it.
Got it. And obviously, I might know some of these answers, but I want to. Yeah.
I figured as much. I'm like, okay.
So with a byline, though, one little thing that I would add to a byline is try to get your creative copy in there as well with a link, right? This is Bobby Warren of Worcester Media. There you go. I know it's wrong.
Whoa. Worcester Media Group LLC.
There you go. Worcester.
My attorney, I printed up business cards with just Worcester Media Group on it, and I gave one to my attorney, and he's like, this needs to have LLC on it.
Oh, goodness.
And I'm like, okay, so as a reporter, you didn't care if it was Acme Limited, Acme Incorporated, Acme LLC. It was just Acme, right? So he says, you need to have LLC on it so people know that if they're going to sue you, they can't get everything you have, only the assets in the company. So I'm like, okay.
That's a fair point from a lawyer. I appreciate that from a lawyer standpoint.
So anyway, it's become a running joke. If somebody says Worcester Media Group, I said my attorney says I got to add LLC.
All right, Worcester Media Group LLC, comma LLC probably. Sorry, so sorry. So that's a byline. How does someone create a headline that will get someone's attention?
Well, anymore, put an odd number in it, list an odd number of things. I am OCD about odd numbers. I work with freelancers, and if they turn in something with even number, I said, no, we got to add one more because I don't want to take away one, but we got to add one more. Or this happened recently. We had, 7 things like stay-at-home parents should know about, or 7 reasons why stay-at-home parents should have life insurance, right? And so ended up having to take away one of the points, and we're down to 6. I'm like, okay. I said, look, let's just list 5 reasons, and then at the bottom we'll put bonus reason, which we did. So odd numbers have a higher click-through rate. I forget the numbers, either 20, 25% more click-through rate. So just kind of what I look at is some type of odd number, reasons, tricks, tips, your keyword, like life insurance or something like that.
Interesting.
So anyway, I'm OCD about those odd numbers.
All right. When I'd done a crowdfunding project for Anomaly when it first came out, and I used that as the announcement because when I signed with the publisher, I knew that it was still a long time away, and I wanted to do something that was different. And in the campaign goodie bag or whatever you get when someone signs up, every number that we did was a prime number, which was different. And it's kind of OCD like what you're saying, where it's like, okay, do something that's very different. And so I always thought that was interesting.
Now, prime numbers, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, prime numbers a little bit harder to do. So, look, I wrote the book called Anomaly. I got to do things that are different. Come on. How does someone that sucks at writing, what can they do to improve their writing before they hire someone like you to make it easier for them?
If somebody's not good at writing?
Yeah, what can they do to get better at it?
Well, when I first started writing, like when I knew I wanted to be a writer, I picked up an edition of Writer magazine, and it said if you want to be a writer, and this is how old it is. Says get a typewriter, right? So this was even before word processors. Uh, so get a typewriter, sit it on the kitchen table, sit down, start writing, and when you get up in 10 years, you'll be a writer. So if you want to be a writer, it just takes time. And interestingly enough, it was at the 10-year mark that I felt, I think I can write. So it was about 10 years before I felt like I had a grasp on writing. So I mean, if you want to write, uh, you can take some online courses. You can look for just read whatever, but you have to write, you know. And I think, was it Malcolm Gladwell who basically, said, do something either X thousands times or
10,000
10
hours to
years.
become an expert. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So now this writer article that I read was like had to have been in the early 90s. So, so anyway, but it's just, I mean, there's no substitute for doing it.
It's interesting when people. So I find that I'm a terrible writer. I feel like I can speak fine. Speaking for a living is my profession. Hey. But when I was writing Anomaly, people were like, "How did you do it?" And I said, honestly, like I just wrote as many words a day that I could. If you can write 500 to 1,000 words a day, after a month or two, that's 30 to 60,000 words. That's kind of a normal book. You'd be surprised, and I think so many people try and force it. And I'm like, don't force it because you just need to get the words out. And so there's ways that you can do it now where it's, you can physically write, you can voice to text, you can dictate, you could, sometimes I'd like do like literally just record on my phone while I'm driving and then I'll go back to it later. I mean, there's so many ways that you can write and make it easier. And I think more people should do that.
Yeah, I was watching a video from the income school guys, and one of the things they talk about in writing blog posts is just, you know, just like open probably Google Docs or something, just use speech to text and then clean it up later.
I think that's tremendous advice because I think that more. I've even heard like don't edit while you're writing, just write, get stuff out. And so I've been working on book number 2, and I just write, and then a couple months goes by, and then you go back to edit it, and you're like, well, I hope I know what I was trying to say there,
Yeah,
which is always the hard part with that. What do you do in your free time?
my free time,
Yeah, so like, what's a
uh,
hobby of yours?
oh, I do magic.
Okay.
So I'm a magician. I was performing about 20, 25 shows a year, and so it's magic was something that I never really advertised. It was just all kind of word of mouth because I was so busy at the newspaper. Well, that was one thing I could do on the side that didn't really interfere with, my job. So, but yeah, I love magic. Um, I teach Sunday school. I teach an adult Sunday school
What's your
class.
favorite magic trick to put on? I don't know what the right word is.
Um, um, my favorite one to perform,
Perform. That's the word I'm looking for.
it's called, I wish I don't even have anything with me. I should have, because I could have performed something for you here today. It's called the Professor's Nightmare, right? It's a 3 rope effect. You got a short, medium, and long piece of rope. You hand them out to the spectators like, here, look at it, look at it, look at it. And this, I mean, you could do this if I were visiting you in Norfolk today. We could go to a hardware store. We can go to like a CVS. I buy clothesline or whatever. I can cut the rope with you there watching me, and I can perform this trick. So it's short, medium, long. They all become the same length. Then they're all, then they're all different lengths, and there's a whole series of things I do with it. But it's like a $3, $5 trick. And a lot of people dismiss it because it's a $3, $5 trick. So if it's, it's kind of that thing where, you know, people buy diamond over cubic zirconia because, diamonds are perceived to be more valuable. But if you look at cubic zirconia, I'm not a jeweler, it just looks good. You know what I mean? So because it's not a high priced item, a lot of people overlook it. It is the one effect that gets the most response and most talked about that I do, and I love it. I love magic with ordinary objects, things that you can touch and feel, and it's just I don't know. I just love it.
What have you learned in magic that you are able to parlay into business in your career?
Ooh, like um, that's an interesting question. You ask good questions. You've been told that before, haven't you? Uh, so what have I used from magic? Like I think like in magic, when you perform an effect and even when you perform a show, it's kind of like writing. You've kind of got to introduce things as to kind of like, hey, something here is gonna happen. So you kind of introduce it. And then so you have the introduction and then you have the middle, like, okay, this is what is happening. And then you have your conclusion where you kind of wrap things up and it might be even more surprising than what you thought. So you kind of have to so you have to introduce, let people know like, okay, something's going to happen, and here's kind of the projection we're following. And so interestingly enough, there's a magician, an Ohio magician, Dan Harlan. He came out with like with a kind of a show structure because like when I started performing, I just like, okay, I like this trick, I like this trick, well, this one fooled me, I'm going to do this one. And so you have like 10 effects that you do. It's like, and basically what I was performing is what magicians call a dealer demo show. So it's like I'm a magic dealer just demonstrating all this stuff. Nothing was tied together. It's just like, hey, this is what I love to do. So, but Dan Harlan came up with what's called triple. I think it's the triple trilogy show structure. Uh, so you do 9 effects. Each section has 3 pieces, 3 pieces, 3 pieces. Each effect out of those 9 have a specific purpose. And so the power of threes, right? Going back to odd numbers and going back to your prime numbers. And so that's kind of some, what I learned, something I can carry over from magic is kind of the setup, the delivery, and then kind of the conclusion. And and hopefully you'll keep them entertained, and want to be there for the payoff.
In journalism school, I feel like I learned the diamond method, and it sounds like, did you learn that method when you were there?
I learned the inverted pyramid and the wine glass.
The wine glass. Okay, they're probably all very similar things, but basically, it's you gotta tell something. That the diamond method is roughly say something ridiculous to start. That's like your crazy headline. Then give it a bunch of case studies and facts. That's kind of like your delivery and getting people ramped up in, and then interviews and things like that, and then wind it back down to basically say, hey, like, I told you this, you didn't believe it was possible. I showed you all the facts. Here it is, and then boom, I did it for you, and I showed you how this is actually truthful. It's how I think the one thing that I actually learned in college is the thing that I remember. So that's what 100 grand looks like, I guess, the diamond method.
I've never heard that, but it sounds like kind of the blog structure for the income school guys.
Maybe I'm lying. I don't know. Like maybe I didn't learn it.
Hey, maybe you came up with it yourself.
Gosh,
but
I need to use
So the
that.
inverted pyramid is, you get your most important information at the top of the story, and then it gets as the least important it comes down. So most important to least important. Because back in the old days, and this is the way they did it when I started, they actually printed out on film. They'd get the wax, they'd paste it up. So they'd paste up uh, what the page would look like. And if your story went too long, they could literally take an X-Acto knife and cut across and get rid of that extra copy.
Right.
And so the
Because you
inverted
used to write by lines, right? Is that how they did it?
well, you know, you would write, your story, and let's say if it was a 24-inch story, now they want like 10 to 12-inch stories, but let's say you had a 24-inch story, and maybe the news hole was only 22 inches, so they'd go in and they have to figure out where they're going to cut, so uh but anyways, journalism's going to shorter pieces, less attention spans.
People are OCD apparently. So,
I was just going to tell you briefly, the wine glass is similar to the inverted pyramid. So you're going to get your most important information, then it's going to go to the least important, right? Then you're going to have your story, and then you have that nice surprise at the ending. So it kind of comes back out. So that's the wine glass.
I guess that's also from a wine glass. It's get the most important stuff out so that people at least remember to say that, and then, or if the last thing they read, they'll say that as well. So that's interesting. Why did you decide to open your own business? And was there something that, or someone that that really helped you kind of jumpstart or catapult?
You want the long story or the short story?
I'll take the 12-inch story. We'll start with 24, and then they're going to cut it off and give me 12 inches, right? Isn't that what they said?
Yeah. So anyway, let me see how quickly I can do this. It's 2016, maybe mid 2016. My wife and I are watching I call him Guy Fieri, not Fieri, but Guy Fieri's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives.
Great show.
We see a restaurant, Grover's, up in Niagara Falls area, right? And I forget the town. So my wife went to Niagara Falls, I believe, when she was in college, and she's like, oh, she'd like to go back. And so we were looking, and like Niagara Falls was about 3 hours away from our house. And we used to drive to Cincinnati, which is 3 hours. So it's kind of like, hey, we can go to Niagara Falls. So we end up going there, have a great time. We go to the restaurant, we go to Niagara Falls. And I had been wanting my wife to start a blog forever. And it finally dawned on her because this was like a 46, 47-hour trip we went on. And she's like, I can do a blog called Wendy's Weekend Trips and Whatnot. So Wendy with an I. So wendywarren.com is where her blog is, Wendy with an I. And so that trip kind of got her blogging. She has not monetized her blog at all. It's a labor of love. And so I was telling someone at the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Worcester, I said, hey, my wife started a blog. She says, well, you need to go to this blogging conference. And I go to the blogging conference, and I had started to learn about SEO, search engine optimization, because of my wife's blog. And my wife says, hey, there's a session on SEO that you should attend. I attend the session, and I meet Claudia Pennington, who at the time had an online course teaching you how to do online technical SEO audits. Took the course. Claudia told me in like October 2016, she says, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to work with about 10 clients a year and make six figures. And okay, I'm making, in the 30,000 range as a reporter. I'm like, what? So I was actually going to try to do this as a side hustle. And then our company sold, the newspaper sold. So, and in the new employee handbook, I can't compete against the company, and the company has a digital marketing agency. So like, okay, so I put it on the side, fast forward, 9 months later, Gatehouse has bought us. I'm not too pleased with how things are going, and I'm getting out. So that's how I started my business. Started in January 2018, and so the business is based on three prongs. Search engine optimization. So let me do an audit of your website. I'll figure out what's wrong with it. How can we get it to rank higher? And then I'm like, well, you know what? I can create this content for your website to help you rank. And hey, let's push this out on social media so I can do social media management. So my tagline is optimize, publicize, socialize. And so I started the business and I did well. I think the first year I did about $25,000 worth of business. When I talk about numbers, it's not bragging. Like it's just like these are just what the numbers are, and it just shows you I've been blessed. Second year in business, I did a little over 42, and now this year I should more than double last year's. I should be getting close to six figures, and that's gross. I put you know I work with a lot of freelance writers, so it's not there's revenue going out, so I have that revenue going out, and so it's not going to be okay, hey, I'm making all this money because a lot of it's going out for software, a lot of it's going out for writers and taxes. When you own your own business, you pay the full freight on your Social Security, Medicare, and all that happy stuff.
Very interesting. So the development of the audit, the content, and then the media management. Those are kind of your big three. So you use the audit to pull people in, and you give them that kind of thing for free. I think, right?
Oh, no,
No,
that's
sorry,
$75 an hour, brother.
sorry. So how do you find these people? What do you what? So you find someone, say, hey, can I give you an audit? And then they do that audit, they pay you for that audit, and then you upsell them on this other stuff as well.
Yeah, so kind of backtrack a little bit. Yeah, I could do an automated audit for free, but I hate those automated audits. They just don't deliver the kind of information that will help you. They kind of give you, a rough idea, but it doesn't get into the nitty-gritty. So
It's context that's missing, right? I feel like that's what a lot of stuff is missing, is the context of stuff, right? It's
it like for example, right? And SEO changes every day. Google, I think just a couple years ago, they were doing about 1,500 changes a year. So we hear about a few major algorithm updates, but they're tweaking it every single day. So, but for example, not too long ago, you didn't want to have more than one H1 tag on your page because you didn't want to confuse the bots. Like, so H1 would be like, here's the main headline of the page. So I did an automated audit of a website, and it had like two and three H1 tags, and it was saying, your pages are perfect. I'm like, no. So I don't trust automated audits. I could do it for free, but the free version I don't trust.
got it. And H1 is it's a way that well, why don't you define it? I mean, I know what it is, but what
So
is
the
H1?
H1, the way I view it is it's the main headline of your page. It's, so that's the odd number of things, keyword tips and tricks, right? So when a search engine bot is indexing your page, okay, say you have an H1 that says, 5 reasons why stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home parents need life insurance. Then you have another H1 that says something different. It's like, okay, what is more important? How is the search bot going to understand what the intent of this page is? So when you're using proper H1, H2s, H3s, it has a better idea. So I I heard people say, yeah, with, you can use multiple H1s now. I'm like, yeah, go ahead and do that if you want to. I'm a little bit old school. I am sticking with a single H1. Because with these page builders, you can make an H2 look bigger than an H1. And so.
And I think what's interesting too is you being in year 3 of your business. I feel like year 3 is usually when everything starts hitting, right? The frequency is there. You feel more comfortable, right? You might not be at the 10,000 hours of Malcolm Gladwell. Maybe you are, but like, that frequency really does build up, and more people get to see you, and you get to be on more shows, and
Right.
It all just starts adding up. And so I'm not surprised that you're seeing growth year after year, because
Yeah.
with the tens of thousands of businesses I've seen, it's the ones that stick with it are the ones that continue to grow.
Yeah.
It's the ones that don't.
Now, the first time I was introduced to you was when you were on the Two Frugal Dudes podcast. And I believe that you were, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know what Zack Miller says better than I know what Zack Miller says.
Depending on the day, that's true or false.
But I think like you were like, why would you do cold calling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started my business with warm calls, not with cold calls. And then it just referrals started taking off. And so I'm telling you, man, I have been blessed. It's like,
so what's a warm call to you?
Like a warm call is approaching someone that I have a previous relationship with.
We have so much low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. We've been building networks forever that if we just reinforced that and went back and talked to those people, the other stuff would happen in place, right? You don't have to necessarily meet someone else to get that, right? So you and I have a relationship, right? And I could just come out to you and be like, hey, like, what's up, Bobby? Like, how are you? Right? And start reinvigorate that relationship to go from there, rather than me trying to like, go through all this stuff and be like, oh, hey, Bobby, I don't know you. Let me talk to you for the first time.
Right. I was watching, I was watching an online course from Digital Marketer about, creating offers. And it talked about this scientist who studied animals and then studied, humans, and talked about like those 12 stages of intimacy, and where, the first stage is, he was talking about is eye to body. So we're in a proximity, and I recognize you. And then we go from eye to eye. And then we might go from hand to hand where we shake hands. Then we might go hand to body, like, hey, how you doing? I'm Italian, so I touch, I hug, and all that happy stuff.
So all these things are how you get more comfortable with someone. These things are getting stronger.
Right.
Interesting.
And so as it applies to cold calling and the customer journey, so if I don't know you, I can't jump straight to, hey, I have this and you need it. It's like, we got to build a relationship before we get to that conversion point.
Well, and even if you just look at your standard data points that say like, hey, like you're going to increase your probability by just playing a couple of steps, I think it's a smart move to do, right? I mean, like, when was the last time you got a cold call from someone, number one, picked up the phone, but then number two, actually bought from them?
Right. I had a cold years ago. I had a cold call. It was somebody selling, like, is it the Rain Soft water softener or whatever? And he says, if you buy today, you're going to get like $12,000 in bonuses and product and all this. I said, look, I'm not making a decision today. And I'll tell you what, if I do buy, and when I do buy, I will get those $1,200 in product and discounts, or I'm just not going to buy. It's that simple. You're not, so.
I did a webinar. I was recording a webinar yesterday that I've given many, many times, and I kept telling people, like, you can be in the driver's seat, but you don't know when that person's wallet is out. And so that's why you have to constantly, you don't ever want to give up on someone just because they don't buy, but it's exactly what you just said, where it's like, you don't know when is appropriate time for them. Everything that we build wants to be for us, when really we need to be thinking about, well, when is it appropriate for them so that it works. And I think all too often we're too selfish in that kind of way.
Yeah, and um, along those lines, like I work with freelance writers, right? So I have a client, he encouraged me, because I'm telling him, I said, I need to build a passive income. So I actually started another website, afterjournalism.com, where I'm trying to reach out to journalists and former journalists and say, hey, look, this is how I went, and was able to increase my income, right? And so I'm saying I need to create this passive income because right now, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just a well-paid freelancer. If I don't work, I don't get paid, right? And if I don't, I think it was in the book E-Myth. I listened to E-Myth Revisited or revised version, and it says, if if your he says if your business or your company uh, cannot like if you don't show up at your company and it can't run, then you don't have a business. You know, you're a freelancer, something like that. I don't, and I mean that's basically where I'm at. I need to show up, I need to work, but I work with a number of freelancers, and so when I started as a solopreneur. And so my rates, the rates I was charging uh, was pretty good, right? Not as good as some other freelance writers are getting, but it was pretty good, and it's good for one person. But now, when I'm trying to bring in a freelance writer, because the friend said, "Hey, look, turn your business into a free passive income business." So if I bring in freelancers, then I'm getting a cut out of everything that's coming through, that they're writing. And so, the rates I'm making right now as a solopreneur, they're not great. So, I basically can afford newer writers, people trying to get bylines, build up their portfolio. And so if I see someone says, "Hey, does anybody want a guest post?" I'm like, "Well, look, I can pay you a little bit of money. I think the worker is worth his or her wage, and I would rather pay someone than have them do something for free. I don't want to make money off their free work.
Sure.
If if we're if we're prospecting and we don't know what we're going to make, then if you want to contribute some free labor, fine. But I'm not going to make money off your back, and you not earn something. So I see someone wants a guest post, I say, hey, I can pay you X, right? I got small margins. And if you want to work, fine. But if you can't afford that, it's no sweat off my back. So this is kind of going back to what's in your wallet kind of question. And I said, conversely, if you can't do it for the rate, that is fine. I am not going to be offended. And neither will I be offended if 3 months down the road you're slow and you got some capacity in the pipeline, you want to earn a few extra bucks, shoot me an email, shoot me a text and say, hey, Bobby, do you have any work? I'm not going to be offended. This is business.
Yeah.
We help each other where we can. And
And I think that's great. I think all too often people give up on a relationship just because it didn't work right now when it was beneficial for them. When it's like, I have customers that literally were just friends for like 10, 12 years. And then they finally went to, they then eventually went to this job where they could actually become a customer. And now they pay me, multiple thousands of dollars a year for this service that I can provide them, which basically was 10 years in the making. And it's like, there's no sweat off my back. And so I appreciate that you're looking at the long game in that kind of world. What's something that you thought we would talk about today that we haven't?
I don't know, because you said you had no structure. You're just going to jazz it. So it's like, that's fine with
So,
me.
so have we jazzified this enough for you?
Oh, indeed, indeed. This has been awesome. It's because it's kind of like, here's what I appreciate about this approach is that you know, we're obviously entrepreneurs, right? We want to make money, right? And we want to make money to take care of our families, protect our future, and be able to do some fun stuff. And so a lot of times, much of the focus is on, all right, how are we going to monetize this? How are we going to monetize that? But this has just been two guys sitting around having a conversation. It has been awesome.
Love it. What when you meet someone for the first time, what's the first question that you ask them?
What's your name? And then then I forget it about 10 seconds later. When I was younger, if you told me your name, right, and we just met for 15 seconds, I saw you 3 years later, I'd call you by your name. And now I'm ashamed to say that you can tell me your name, and I might forget it 15 seconds later, just like my mind works a mile a minute. It's like my mind never shuts down.
Do you have Netflix? What
Yes.
are you watching on Netflix?
Uh,
What's something that you've watched on Netflix recently that was just wild?
I'll tell you what. So a client recently flew me down to New Orleans to do communications work at a trade show. And so I'd never been to New Orleans. I thought, man, this is awesome. And, it's like, this is the first client who's ever really paid me to travel. You know what I mean? So it's like, as a kid who grew up in a broken home, uh, this kind of stuff is like, it might be like every day for other people. This is big time for me, like just totally blessed, so grateful for the client. So I went to New Orleans, then I come back, and then I see on Netflix there's a show called The Pharmacist, right? And it's based in New Orleans. We were probably where we were staying and traveling, it was probably like 4 or 5 miles. This guy's a pharmacist. His son,
Gets into drugs or something?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so this dude, ends up solving his son's murder, and he was at the forefront of the opioid epidemic.
And
Trying
this
to,
and this dad is going into like neighborhoods that people wouldn't normally go, and he's like, yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. So it was kind of interesting, and I think we just want. Oh, and something else. It's a Netflix movie. So anyway, Pharmacist was awesome, and we were down in New Orleans, so we were close. So that made that kind of an emotional connection. And then Mark Wahlberg has a new movie on Netflix, came out in March. It's called, I think, Spencer Confidential.
Right.
The working title was Wonderland. And Wonderland, depending on your vantage point, is either the first stop or the last stop on the Blue Line, which is the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority subway system. So on the Blue Line, and Wonderland is in Revere, Mass, where I grew up. So the working title was Wonderland. They ended up changing it to Spencer Confidential, and so I wanted to watch it because part of it was filmed in Revere, probably 600 feet from where my mom lives on the beach. So it's Revere. Revere Beach was the first public beach, and so there might be 40, 60 seconds of footage from Revere in the movie. And so I think what's funny is they shot on the beach, right? So that's Revere Beach. And then they shoot across the street, and that's somewhere else. I don't know if it's Point of Pines, but it wasn't across the street from where they were at all. Wonderland was torn down years ago, so I don't know. I don't think they shot at uh, Wonderland was a dog track there. So it's a train station and there's a Wonderland dog track. So maybe the train station was named after the dog track. I don't know. So anyway, the Wonderland dog track is not there anymore, so I don't know where they filmed that, but it didn't look like Wonderland dog track because there was too many trees around it. So
The magic of Hollywood.
yeah, yeah.
If people want
So
to learn more about you, where can they do that?
um, so my company is Worcester Media Group LLC, but Worcester WOOSTER. So WorcesterMediaGroup.com. That's kind of like my business site, and it's there's not a lot happening there just because I'm so busy, you know. And so then I started my side project afterjournalism.com, trying to reach out to former journalists and journalists who want to exit the industry and just try to help them along. Say, look, this is what I did. Um, and then my wife's blog, if you just like fun stuff, wendywarren.com, WendyWarren.com. And you asked me something and like what you didn't ask about. And I don't know necessarily that you didn't ask, but something that I'd like to share, and maybe this is the wine glass right here, is that my my business was really built on what I called, and I just said it the other day, serendipitous moments. It's like I had in my mind, I'm following my financial projections, but I'm reaching it in such different ways that it's like, I don't want to say I'm lucky, but I think it was Woody Allen who said, like, 80% of life is just showing up. So being there, meeting with people, not not always being in that sales mode. I mean, I tell people, look, if I can help you, I will. And if we enter a business relationship, that's even better. So I have no problem helping people because my business was is the result of so many people helping me, like Claudia Pennington, Greg Long, who's a local businessman, Jim Smale, who's a local businessman. But there are just like moments like me meeting Claudia, me going to FinCon. So it's like these connections, going back to the warm calls instead of cold calls. I mean, that's how my business has grown. And, you know, it's just been unbelievable. So making yourself available and just kind of letting people know that you're there to help. And hey, if we do business, that's even better. Just
Love it.
so yeah. And so I really appreciate you reaching out and say, hey, you want to be on because you know, um, we like I said, we followed each other on Twitter, interacted, have fun, you know, and on on Twitter when we were talking about this upcoming podcast, and I joked and I said, "Hey, we're not going to be within 500 feet of a school, are we?" That's a line that the late magician Don Englund said, and it was just a way for him to get people to chuckle and kind of put them at like almost this unease, like what's going on? And in that moment, he did some sneaky stuff that he needed to do to make the trick work. And so, so anyway, you know, I, I've appreciated getting to, dip into Anomaly, whenever I need a quick answer. That is like, that was an interesting way to write a book. Like, so often we get bogged down in the weeds trying to find an answer. And an Anomaly is like, okay, here's the question, here's the topic we're discussing. Here's, a page, maybe 2 pages, and like, boom, there you go. And so,
Well, you can't call a book Anomaly and then make it look like everything else, right?
right. So anyway, I've appreciated, like I said, the invitation and getting to interact more with you, and, one other thing is that, so we're recording this during a pandemic. You know, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube 10 years from now, you'll be like, what the heck was that? But it's interesting that right now my business, my business, I've been really busy. Last week was the busiest week that I've had in my 2+ years business. I'm in my third year now, and things are just, I'm just, like I say, blessed. I'm waiting for the I'm waiting for the bottom to fall out, but it hasn't happened yet.
Do you think, to get back to kind of the first part that we talked about on this, is that because do you think that because we hear one side of a story that freaks us out from a crisis perspective, and then the actual story is far from that in many cases? Like, where do you think that is on that? Because I'm not surprised that you're seeing that either, this growth right now, because the overwhelming majority of people that I talk to are having that situation right now, not the opposite.
So when President Obama was working on the Affordable Care Act, or Nancy Pelosi, I think her name should have been on that legislation. But anyway, when the Affordable Care Act came out, there was a like knee-jerk reaction, like this is going to cripple the economy, it's going to hurt business. And I remember talking to a local businessman, Chris Schmid, who unfortunately died way too early. I said, "Hey, Chris, what do you think?" Because he was an incredible thinker, incredible businessman, just smart. I said, "What do you think about this Affordable Care Act?" He says, "It's not going to be as bad as they say, and it's not going to be as good as they say. It's going to fall somewhere in the middle." And I think that's the case with the coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever term you want to use with it, is that you know it's probably not as bad as some of the hype, and I'm not calling it a hoax at all. This is serious. And so it's not probably as bad as it seems, and it's kind of somewhere in the middle between, oh, I'm not worried about this, we're still going to do this. In fact, I'm in a building that is closed right now, and I probably shouldn't be in here, but we made this commitment, and I wanted to be here because I couldn't do this at home because my dog was barking too much.
We're essential.
Yes, we are. Because, in Ohio, there's a stay-at-home order, and communications and IT are considered essential. And broadly, you and I are in the communications business.
There you go. And people need to hear us. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Zack Miller Says. It's been an absolute pleasure, an honor, and an absolute... I don't know why people say that. Look, I just appreciate you listening to this episode. And I have this exclusively free, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you right now. It's simple. All you have to do is go to zackmillersays.com/newsletter to get my once-a-week email directly to your email client, whatever you use, like Gmail, Yahoo, AOL. Yeah, you could probably still use that, but it's a once a week, easy to dissect and execute tips, tricks, things I'm thinking about, some content that I've been working on, some entertainment, and sometimes even The Rock makes an appearance. I'd love for you guys to check it out. It's super free. All you have to do is go to mynamessays.com/newsletter. That's Zack, Z-A-C-K. Please don't spell it Zach. zackmillersays.com/newsletter, and you'll get that access every Monday morning, 10:15-ish Eastern Standard Time. It will take up like 90 seconds of your day, and it might actually even help you. We'll just keep it at that. It might just help you, because if I said something else, then I'd have to actually deliver on that. It might help you. zackmillersays.com/newsletter is the go-to one-stop shop to your weekly email newsletter needs. Check it out at zackmillersays.com/newsletter. Peace and pancakes. Bye-bye now.